Why Revival Tarries by Leonard Ravenhill, Chapter 11. The Epigraphs. Could a mariner sit idle if he heard the drowning cry? Could a doctor sit in comfort and just let his patients die? Could a fireman sit idle, let men burn and give no hand? Can you sit at ease in Zion, with the world around you damned? Leonard Ravenhill. Give me the love that leads the way, the faith that nothing can dismay, the hope no disappointments tire, the passion that will burn like fire. Let me not sink to be a clod. Make me thy fuel, flame of God. Amy Wilson Carmichael. Among whom ye shine as lights in the world, holding forth the word of life. Philippians 2:15 and 16. Ye are the light of the world. Matthew 5:14. Why Revival Tarries, Chapter 11. Why don't they stir themselves? America cannot fall because she is already fallen. This goes for Britain too. She cannot go into slavery because her people are fettered at the moment in the chains of self-forged, self-chosen moral anarchy. Here are millions diseased morally with no longing for healing. Here are men paying for shadows at the price of their immortal souls, men who not only reject the substance, but who openly sneer at and caricature it. An unprecedented tidal wave of commandment-breaking, God-defying, soul-destroying iniquity sweeps the ocean of human affairs. Never before have men in the masses sold their souls to the devil at such bargain prices. There is none that stirreth up himself to take hold of thee. What hell-born mesmerism holds them? How does the spell bind? Who brainwashed them? Why don't they wake and stir themselves? Directed by the devil, the world has given a new injection to the flesh. One of the signs of the last days is that men are lovers of pleasures. Note that it is in the plural. And where is hell's broth stewed? In the breweries of the world. It is a lame argument that in some cases government subsidies are granted to help the breweries keep men employed. Breweries are maternity clinics that breed menslayers operating with guns and men driving on the highways while drunken. Courts deal with the fruit of liquor. Revival would slay this deadly tree at the roots. The mad merry-go-round of sensuality is filled with millions awaiting their turn for initiation into iniquity. When wrong is so sweet a morsel, the sin-soaked, sex-slain youth could not care less about doing right. One crowded hour of glorious life, so they argue, is worth a gamble on the speculation of the theologian's so-called eternity. Look for one bitter moment. Could anything be less intelligent and unmanly than a drinking match? The prize winner is the last man standing on his feet, when all others, grunting like hogs, have fallen to the floor, unconscious in drink. This is a sport not of Stone Age men of the Balium Valley, but of the new intellectuals, satiated in body, stained in soul, and recklessly abandoned to iniquity. Loaded with lechery, gutted with gambling, damned in drink, such men, who are adult in body but moral imbeciles, whine out Lord Byron's lament. I now have ashes where once I had fire. The soul in my body is dead. The thing I once loved I now merely admire. My heart is as gray as my head. If the church had something vital and victorious to offer, these men who choose golf clubs by day and night clubs by night might be drawn from these flesh pots. Since in their freedom men will not heed God, will he have to enslave to communism the mighty millions of America, that they might have time to remember his day, his way, and his son? Better to die bound in body and free in spirit than free in body and bound in soul. We stand aghast when we see fine men magnetized by science, but mystified by the Christian religion. When these have forsaken faith, they feed on films and football. In the light of 1,000 years being as one day, it has taken science a matter of mere seconds to bring us from the chuck wagon to the station wagon, and from the covered wagon to the Sputnik. But after admitting that science does hold and attract when it drills a hole 2 miles deep into the earth for oil, and if there is none, does the same thing in the sea, as off the shores of Mexico, let us seriously consider that science has diabolic and deadly forms too, even lobotomization. Lobotomization is the inhuman, devil-inspired surgery spawned by science. As you consider science in this guise, be imaginative, and yet a realist. For years, this horrible operation on the brain has been a weapon in the hands of dictators. Hitler used it on millions of his own flesh and blood. Stalin is said to have turned over 10 million of his slaves into living zombies with this simple operation, which takes only 5 minutes to perform. Afterwards, the victim is said to be irrevocably insane. The patient is strapped to an operating table. The strap's tight and very strong. Electrodes are attached to the temples. 3 jolts of electricity are shot through the patient's brain, enough to start violent convulsions which finally give way to anesthetic coma. The doctor then takes his leucotomes, ice pick-like instruments, and inserts them under the patient's eyelids. With a hammer, he drives through the eye sockets into the forepart of the brain, severing the prefrontal lobes of the brain from the rest of it. The result? A zombie, for want of a better word. 15 zombies can be made by science in 90 minutes. To add to this, we have the alarming news that there are probably 100,000 lobotomized people in the United States, according to George Konitz in Liberty League News. When enlightened men dehumanize other men in this fashion, it is time to stop and ask if the great goddess of science has not received too much veneration from men. Keeping those lobotomized millions in mind, meditate on this from the pen of famed Bertrand Russell, whose Principles of Logic has made him the uncrowned king of modern philosophers. Man now needs for his salvation only one thing, to open his heart to joy and leave fear to gibber through the glimmering darkness of a forgotten past. He must lift up his eyes and say, "No, I am not a miserable sinner. I am a being who, by a long and arduous road, has discovered how to master natural obstacles, how to live in freedom and joy, at peace with myself and therefore with all mankind." Would it be hard to persuade yourself that this false prophet of peace is dedicated to deception, consciously or otherwise? The same Bertrand Russell has trouble in trying to accept the Incarnation. But would the relatives of the massacred Hungarians think his message a gospel of hope? This is an hour in need of burning hearts, bursting lips, and brimming eyes. If we were a tenth as spiritual as we think we are, our streets would be filled each Sunday with throngs of believers marching to Zion, with sacks on their bodies and ashes on their shaking heads, shaking at the calamity that has brought the church to be the unlovely, unnerved, unproductive thing that she is. If we wept as much in the prayer closet as devout Jews have done at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, we would now be enjoying a prevailing purging revival. If we would return to apostolic practice, waiting upon the Lord for apostolic power, we could then go forth to apostolic possibilities. This is the hour when we are asked over and over again, is everybody happy? God's purpose for us is not happiness, but holiness. Soberness has given way to silliness, even though Paul, in writing to Titus, warns both young and old, be sober. We surely need again to climb Calvary's hill on our knees to survey the wondrous cross in an attitude of humiliation and adoration. The church must first repent, then the world will break. The church must first weep, then our altars will be filled with weeping penitents. At the very pinnacle of his power, William James, a professor of medicine at Harvard University, was struck down with a mysterious malady. His nerves were upset. He had insomnia and deep depression, but knew no cure for himself. He dashed off to Europe. Would Berlin have the answer? No door of hope opened. What about Vienna? The same answer. Might not Paris shelter a cure? But the panacea was not there. Despair was heightening. London was near, but his call was but an echo. Scotland had eminent sons in this field, but there was no balm in this Gilead either. Back to America he came, the thought of suicide dancing in his brain. At last, a man of prayer and of great faith for healing was recommended. Faith healing was anathema to William James, the distinguished philosopher and famed psychologist. His acute mind and mental training strongly protested against going this way. But needs must. James went. The simple, unlettered man of God put his humble hands on William James' head, who later said, "I felt a mysterious energy thrilling and tingling through my body, which was followed by a sense of peace. I knew I was healed." To cure the raging ills of this maddened world, the Abana of science and the Pharpar of politics are more attractive to our stubborn wills and warped intellects than the wondrous cross. But for mankind to be made whole, we shall have to be as humble as William James was by getting back to the cross of Jesus and its life-giving stream.